So I remember one of my first clients, I remember being a newly qualified therapist, wanting to get out there and fix the world and, you know, treat every patient, as it were. And anyway, one of my first clients, in fact, my very first client was a 62-year-old woman, a white lady who was I remember, very large, very tall, dressed in the Asian outfit, like as if she was an Asian lady, with typical Asian Indian kind of clothes, with the bindi, the red dot, and a stick that had bells on it. And the background to this lady is she had initially requested a female therapist, and obviously we were short-staffed, and I was told by my supervisor, in fact I was referred this client, saying, okay, great, you can see this client and you can start working with her. It was for drug and alcohol addiction. And I worked with this client for approximately 10 sessions, and I remember every session, this sense of anger and rage that she had made me feel as if she was just puking on me. That was my counter-transference, was, I don't want to be here, I want to run. You know, it's just, whoa, can you imagine just someone constantly just the anger in your face and really swearing and effing and blinding and I mean, it's quite intimidating, actually. And I guess let me put things in context and add a bit more padding to this. So this lady would avoid white people and interactions with white people. She had a lot of anger towards white people, and yet she was white herself. She would avoid going into shops where there were white people who were serving. If she had to, out of necessity, go to the till. In the first instance, she'd look for shops where there were Asians, for example, behind the counters, and then she'd be able to talk to them. But if she had to go to a shop where a white person was serving, she'd actually pull out a "I've taken a monk's vow of silence" card, so she wouldn't have to talk to them. Which I found really, really strange, as anyone would, right? There's obviously got to be a significant reason for this level of hatred or anger or resentment towards white people. And clearly on the offset, I was aware that this was a white person who was obviously dressing as an Asian, had so much anger towards white people, so there's got to be something in terms of a trauma and a root cause for this. And not only that, there's a level of dissociation here, that, you know, in terms of maybe it's a cultural or an identity issue. So my countertransference also it manifested actually in me beginning to show up slightly late for the sessions, and slightly avoiding, like maybe doing a little bit of paperwork before the session, so the client had to wait a little. And I was aware of this, but I was very much, as you can appreciate, my first ever client, I was in training, I wasn't fully qualified at this stage, and I'd taken it to supervision, and my supervision had said, in my supervision what had come out was, look, you know, you really shouldn't be working with this person, you're not fully qualified as of this moment, and this is a 62-year-old woman, and I remember my trainer saying to me, I can't believe that this client's been referred to you. If she's 62 years old and she's been okay for this long, she's likely to be okay for the rest of her time, and actually it's really unfair that this has been put on you. And again, I'd seen this client for about 10 sessions, and at the end of our session, so we both knew we were coming to the end of our agreed contracted sessions, and in the last session I was discussing our ending, as in the ending of our working together, and also further referrals. So when I talked about sort of referring this person on, she asked for a female therapist, and I said, well, okay, but you initially asked for a female therapist, and obviously we didn't have any at the time available, and I worked with you, and why do you ask for a female therapist again? And she said, well, maybe because I feel I could cry. And it was really interesting what happened to me, right? Because initially I knew that in previous sessions she'd cried in the session with me. So I'm like, well, okay, what's the significance of this? And and my first question, and I suppose it was out of ego, that this came about, you know. Oh my God, maybe I can get her to cry in front of me and maybe I can fix her. And was, if I continued working with you, do you think you could cry in front of me? And she said, yeah. She said, yeah, I think so. She said, I trust you. And again, my ego kind of was very present and thinking, oh my God, yeah, you know, this is going to be a breakthrough. If I continue working with her, I'll get her to cry. And then, well, hey, you know. And also, I think there was a higher sort of like an observing ego sort of thing came about, almost like a epiphany at that moment I had, which was, God, you know, I'm doing exactly the same thing as all these other therapists have done. They've taken you on for a little bit, felt like you vomited on them and sort of like you're too much to handle, and passed you on. And in actual fact, by referring you on, despite my limits in terms of my ability at the time, I'm doing the same thing. So I said, instinctively, I said, you know what, I'm actually going to continue to work with you, if that's okay. I'd like to offer you another X amount of sessions. And she said, yeah, I'd really like that. So we continued working together, and what was almost mind-blowing was all the counter-transference I had, all the stuff that was going on, all the feeling of her puking on me and all of this. The very next session, all of that just disappeared. It disintegrated. And something had changed. I couldn't place it. Something had changed. And she said, Ali, I'm going to tell you something today that I've never told anyone else. And she said, I was born with Klinefelter syndrome. Now, Klinefelter syndrome, you know, every one of us, most people, are born with 46 chromosomes. And Klinefelter's 23 from the father, 23 from the mother. And in Klinefelter syndrome, and I didn't know anything about this, but in Klinefelter syndrome, you're born with 47. So this lady was born with male genitals, and at the age of puberty grew breasts. So everything all of a sudden now everything just came into context. All the anger that she had, in fact, her background story was she had so much anger with her parents, and it was because they had not understood this Klinefelter syndrome back in the day, and seen her as abnormal and basically disowned her. And she lived in a block of flats, and sort of 4 floors up there was a Bengali family that lived and kind of took her on as her own family, and that's where she got the sense of identity from. But what occurred to me was that here is a woman who, both on a physical and emotional and mental and cultural and sexual sort of level, has an identity issue, right? So I knew very much that I couldn't sort of, treatment for this lady would have taken years perhaps, right, to get to a solid enough sense of self, a secure enough sense of self to adequately function within society. But what I did know was I could provide a corrective emotional experience. What I did know was that what I could do was hold the space between us. What I did know was I could change something by offering her a relationship that she hadn't experienced before, that was unconditional. And I did so. And in the last session, what was really powerful was she offered me a gift, and the rules of I wouldn't say the trade, I don't like calling it trade, but the organization were you're not allowed to accept gifts. And I said, look, you know, thank you so much, but I can't accept this. And she said, no, it'd really, you know, it'd mean a lot to me if you did. And at this moment, again, you know, counter sort of rules and more sort of, I suppose, more intuitively, I accepted the gift, because I realized at that moment that if I don't accept the gift, again, that's a rejection. That's a major rejection for this client, potentially. And I accepted the gift, and she said, look, I only bought it for £1. And she said, I want you to open it. So I opened it, and believe it or not, it was a clock. It was a little clock. And I joked, and I said, well, are you giving this to remind me of coming on time? And she said, no. She said, not at all. She said, I want you to have this, because it's, you know, our time together's meant a lot. In fact, I don't think she said it in that way, but it was interesting because through processing that and symbolically as well, she's given me a clock which represents time, which I believe, and I like to think, represented the time that we spent together. And what I really got from that was, if you give just a little bit more patience, if you give a little bit more time, if you give a little bit more love, if you give a little bit more compassion to your clients, so much more can happen. You can make so many more changes. You can, I don't even know how to explain it. It's just so magical that just that perseverance for a little bit longer, if you're hanging in there a bit more with a client that you believe you're stuck with. And sometimes you just name the elephant in the room. I suppose I'll do another video on that. Name the elephant in the room, you know. Just acknowledge your limitations, acknowledge what's going on for you in terms of, you know, sometimes if I'm stuck with a client now, I'd say, you know, I'm stuck here because we don't have all the answers. But look, just a little bit more. Hang in there. It'll be amazing. Take care.